Before screens, smartphones and the internet, childhood in 1970s, Britain was a world of outdoor games, simple toys, and endless imagination. In this video, we're looking back at 15 ways kids had fun before Wi-Fi ruled their lives. Which ones do you remember most? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more nostalgic trips into the past. Every autumn in the 1970s, Britain, kids would search the ground beneath horse chestnut trees, stuffing their pockets with shiny brown conkers. The ritual was simple but exciting. Thread a shoelace through the nut, knot it, and you had your weapon for the playground. Matches began with the cry of "ready" and ended when one conker smashed the other to pieces, the winner gaining bragging rights and the title of Killer Conker. Children remember soaking conkers in vinegar, baking them in the oven, or coming up with secret tricks to make them harder. Schoolyards rang with the sound of conkers cracking, and sometimes with the groans of bruised knuckles when a swing went wrong. Today, the game is rare, but in the 1970s, it was a seasonal obsession, a reminder that all you needed for hours of fun was a tree, a shoelace, and a bit of daring. In the 1970s, marbles were more than just toys. They were a playground currency. Kids carried them in pockets, swapped them at school, and played endless matches in the dust and gravel. The goal was simple: knock your opponent's marble out of the circle and claim it as your own. Every game carried the thrill of winning a prized swirly or a rare giant shooter, the kind you showed off at break time. Children remember the weight of a bag of marbles clinking against their hip, the excitement of trading, and the heartbreak of losing a favorite piece in a single round. Some polished them until they sparkled, others scuffed them into battle-worn veterans. Marbles weren't just games, they were collections, trophies, and little jewels of childhood. By today's standards, they may seem simple, but in the 1970s, they were magic spheres of color and competition. Hopscotch was one of the simplest but most loved playground games of the 1970s. All you needed was a bit of chalk to draw the numbered squares on the pavement, plus a stone or coin to toss as a marker. Kids hopped, balanced, and sometimes stumbled their way through the grid, chanting rhymes and laughing as friends shouted the rules. It was easy to set up, easy to join in, and a guaranteed way to turn any patch of concrete into a playground. Children remember the scrape of shoes on tarmac, the smudged chalk lines after rain, and the competitive shouts of "no touching the lines." The game didn't need batteries or fancy equipment, just balance, energy, and imagination. In the 1970s, hopscotch was more than exercise. It was a ritual of the schoolyard, a reminder that fun often came from the simplest marks on the ground. Skipping ropes were a playground staple in the 1970s Britain, especially during school break times. Kids would gather in groups, two turning the rope while others jumped in and out, chanting rhymes that seemed to echo in every playground. It wasn't just about fitness, it was about rhythm, teamwork, and showing off clever tricks like double jumps or crossing arms mid-skip. Children remember the slap of the rope against the tarmac, the laughter when someone tripped, and the competitive spirit of who could last longest without missing a beat. The rhymes, often passed down from older kids, gave the game its own soundtrack, creating a shared culture across schools. In the 1970s, a simple rope wasn't just a toy. It was the centerpiece of playground fun, uniting kids in endless games that cost nothing but delivered hours of joy. Kirby was one of the most iconic British street games of the 1970s. All it took was a football and a quiet road with two curbs. Players stood on opposite sides, aiming to bounce the ball against the opposite curb so it would spring back into their hands. A clean hit earned points, and the game could go on for hours, broken only by the shout of "car" when traffic came down the street. Kids remember the scuffed knees from diving catches, the echo of the ball smacking against concrete, and the triumphant cheer when someone hit a perfect rebound. Sometimes house windows rattled nervously, sometimes neighbors complained, but nothing stopped the game. In the 1970s, Kirby wasn't just a pastime. It was a rite of passage of childhood, turning every quiet street into a makeshift arena of skill and friendly rivalry. Hide and seek was a universal favorite of 1970s Britain, played everywhere from back gardens and alleyways to schoolyards and fields. One child covered their eyes and counted aloud, while the others scattered, squeezing behind sheds, hedges, and dustbins in search of the perfect hiding place. The thrill came from holding your breath as footsteps passed close, waiting for the triumphant shout of "Found you!" or the dash to base before being caught. Children remember scraped elbows from clambering over fences, whispered giggles that gave hiding spots away, and the rush of freedom as dusk fell and the game stretched into the evening. It didn't need props or money, just imagination and energy. In the 1970s, hide and seek was more than a pastime. It was childhood distilled into excitement, suspense, and the simple joy of disappearing for a while. Top trumps exploded in popularity during the 1970s, turning break times and bus rides into miniature tournaments. Each set of cards carried stats on cars, planes, or even footballers, and kids battled by comparing who had the highest speed, power, or skill. The rules were simple, but the excitement of slamming down a winning card made every match feel like a championship. Children remember trading decks, memorizing the strongest cards, and the groans when someone pulled out an unbeatable trump. The colorful packs quickly became collectibles, passed around classrooms and swapped in playground corners. In the 1970s, top trumps weren't just cards, they were a craze, a social currency, and one of the first tastes of competitive gaming long before consoles arrived. Before sleek inline skates, kids in 1970s Britain strapped on clunky metal roller skates that buckled over their shoes. Adjustable with a key, they rattled noisily along pavements, sending vibrations up your legs as you tried to keep balance. They weren't smooth, and stopping often meant crashing into a fence or a friend, but they gave children a thrilling sense of speed and freedom. People remember the sparks when wheels scraped against concrete, the bruises from inevitable tumbles, and the triumph of finally gliding without wobbling. Groups of kids skated up and down cul-de-sacs, chasing each other or daring to tackle hills that ended in spectacular pile-ups. In the 1970s, those noisy metal skates weren't just toys. They were badges of courage, teaching balance, resilience, and the joy of motion in the most unpolished way. For kids in 1970s Britain, nothing said independence quite like a bike. The Raleigh Chopper, with its long padded seat, high-rise handlebars, and distinctive gear shift, was the ultimate dream machine. It wasn't the most practical design, but it looked cool, and riding one instantly gave you playground status. Toward the late 70s, BMX bikes arrived, built for tricks, jumps, and dirt tracks, sparking a whole new cycling craze. Children remember racing friends down cul-de-sacs, wobbling dangerously while giving someone a lift on the back seat, and the feeling of freedom as streets blurred past. Bikes weren't just transport, they were adventure, escape, and identity. In the 1970s, whether you had a flashy chopper or an early BMX, your bike wasn't just wheels. It was your ticket to the wide world beyond the front garden. When the weather turned grey, children in 1970s, Britain turned indoors to board games. Monopoly marathons stretched across the carpet. Cluedo brought mystery to the table, and Mousetrap added a splash of chaos with its plastic contraptions. Families gathered around the table, dice rattling, rules argued over, and friendships tested by who ended up with Mayfair or who guessed Colonel Mustard in the library. Kids remember rainy weekends where hours slipped away under the glow of a single lamp, laughter mixed with sulks when someone flipped the board in defeat. The bright boxes sat stacked in cupboards, waiting to be pulled out whenever boredom struck. In the 1970s, board games weren't just pastimes. They were social glue, teaching patience, strategy, and the art of winning or losing with grace. For kids in 1970s Britain, a pocketful of change meant one thing: penny sweets. The local corner shop was a treasure chest filled with jars of gobstoppers, cola cubes, sherbet pips, and flying saucers. Children pressed their noses to the glass, carefully choosing how to stretch every penny into the biggest haul of sugar possible. The memory is vivid. The crinkle of paper bags, the smell of sweets mixed with tobacco and newspapers, and the excitement of tipping your loot into eager hands outside the shop. Sometimes you shared, sometimes you guarded every last chew, but the ritual itself was half the fun. In the 1970s, penny sweets weren't just treats. They were independence in miniature, a first taste of freedom and choice for a generation of kids. When Panini albums hit Britain in the 1970s, they sparked a collecting craze like no other. Kids rushed to newsagents for fresh packets, tearing them open with a mix of excitement and dread. Would it be a shiny superstar or yet another duplicate? The thrill of filling an album, page by page, became a mission that stretched across playgrounds and schoolyards. Children remember the chants of got, need, echoing at break times, the intense swaps that could make or break a collection, and the pride of finally completing a full team. Stickers weren't just paper and glue. They were competition, community, and bragging rights rolled into one. In the 1970s, Panini stickers were the ultimate playground currency, uniting kids in the joy of collecting long before digital packs and apps took over. In 1970s Britain, many kids dreamed of building their own bogies, homemade go-karts cobbled together from whatever parts could be found. Old pram wheels, wooden planks, bits of rope for steering, and sometimes a brave sibling riding shotgun. That was all it took to turn a quiet hill into a racetrack. The construction was wobbly, but the thrill of racing down a slope made every splinter and scraped knuckle worth it. Children remember the clatter of wheels on tarmac, the desperate tug on the rope to steer, and the crashes that ended in laughter or bruised knees. There was pride in building your own machine, no matter how rickety it looked. In the 1970s, go-karts weren't bought from a shop. They were invented in back gardens and garages, proof that fun often came from imagination and a few scavenged parts. In the 1970s, Britain, music was a lifeline. and kids often spent hours with vinyl records or homemade cassette tapes. LPs of glam rock, disco, or punk spun on record players, while younger teens huddled by the radio with fingers on the record and play buttons, trying to capture their favorite songs without the DJ talking over the intro. A mixtape wasn't just music. It was a message, sometimes even a gift for a friend. Children remember the crackle of the needle on vinyl, the wobble of a worn-out cassette, and the satisfaction of scribbling track lists onto paper labels. Records were played until they scratched, tapes rewound endlessly with a pencil, and whole afternoons disappeared to the soundtrack of Top of the Pops. In the 1970s, vinyl and mixtapes weren't background noise. They were how kids built identity, community, and the rhythm of their youth. Saturday morning cinema clubs were a weekly highlight for children across Britain in the 1970s. Local picture houses opened their doors to swarms of kids armed with pocket money for tickets and sweets. The programs often mixed cartoons, adventure serials, and short films, creating a few magical hours where the lights dimmed, the screen lit up, and the audience erupted in cheers, boos, and laughter. Children remember the sticky floors, the smell of popcorn, and the sheer noise of hundreds of young voices echoing through the theater. Friendships were forged in the queues outside, and the excitement carried on long after the credits rolled. In the 1970s, Saturday cinema clubs weren't just about films. They were community, ritual, and the thrill of escaping into another world for the price of a coin.